James Connor never thought his own son's voice could sound so desperate. The phone rang at 6:30 in the morning, shattering the silence of the empty house at Oak Hollow Ranch. "Dad, I need your help." Michael hadn't called him in 2 years, not since the day of his mother's funeral. James gripped the receiver tighter. In his son's voice, he heard something that had never been there before: desperation. Michael Connor, brilliant cardiac surgeon from Chicago, always had answers to every question, always controlled every situation. But now he sounded like that 12-year-old boy who used to run to his father after a bad fall from a horse. What happened? James felt his heart racing. "It's Emma." A pause. She fell from a horse a month ago. Doctors say she's physically fine, but she refuses to even go near the stables. She's not sleeping properly, won't talk to me. Jane sat down on the old wooden bench by the kitchen table, the same table where their whole family used to sit. Emma, his 15-year-old granddaughter, whom he'd last seen at her grandmother's funeral. Back then, she was a bright, lively girl who reminded him of young Ellen. "Michael, why are you calling me now?" James knew his question sounded harsher than intended, but 2 years of silence had left wounds. "Because you're the only one who understands horses." His son's voice trembled. "Psychologists aren't helping. She says she'll never get back in the saddle. And riding was the only thing that made her happy after the divorce." Divorce? James didn't know Michael had divorced Jennifer. His son had shared nothing about his life. Now it became clear why the child was suffering. She'd lost trust not only in horses, but in the whole world. "We're coming tonight," Michael continued. "I know things are complicated between us. But Emma needs what you know how to do, what I never learned." James looked through the window at the empty stalls. He'd given away his last horse last spring when he realized he couldn't care for animals alone anymore. But the Harrison neighbors had beautiful horses, and old Tom was always happy to help. "Michael," James took a deep breath. "There are no horses here anymore." The silence on the other end lasted so long that James thought the connection had dropped. "Then we'll have to find some," his son finally said. "Emma can't live with this fear forever. And I don't know how to help her. Mom always said you had a special gift with horses and people. Maybe that gift will pass to your granddaughter." The mention of Ellen stirred something deep in James's heart. His wife had always believed he could heal, not just animals, but human souls. Perhaps it was time to prove she was right. Perhaps it was time to build a bridge between generations, while there was still time. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Nebraska plains as James walked to his old barn. Empty stalls stretched before him, each one holding memories of champions that once lived there. In the third stall, Blaze used to live, the spirited bay stallion James had bought for Michael when the boy was 12. Those were different times. Michael would run from school straight to the barn every day. The boy had natural talent with horses, understood them without words. Together they spent hours preparing Blaze for competitions. James remembered the pride he felt watching his son in the saddle. But everything changed when Michael left for college. At first, the boy still came home for holidays, but gradually, visits became rarer. Medical school demanded all his attention. James understood this with his mind, but his heart ached from the separation. He continued training Blaze, hoping his son would return. Now, Michael was 37, a successful cardiologist in Chicago, accomplished, respected doctor with his own practice. James was proud of his son, but between them lay a chasm of silence. They'd last spoken at Ellen's funeral 2 years ago. James opened the chest of horse grooming tools. Inside still lay old brushes, hoof picks, metal spurs. He picked up Michael's favorite brush, small with soft bristles, perfect for young hands. The wooden handle was worn from use, but still held the warmth of childhood palms. The sound of a car engine pulled him from his memories. James walked out of the barn and saw a black sedan approaching on the gravel road. His heart beat faster. He recognized his son's car. Michael was driving here for the first time in 2 years, and not alone. James knew Emma would be with him, his 15-year-old granddaughter. The car stopped near the house. Michael stepped out from the driver's seat, tall, lean, in an expensive suit. His hair had grayed at the temples, and his face had become more stern. From the passenger side emerged a teenage girl with long blonde hair and a troubled expression. Emma had grown since James last saw her. Michael walked around the car and approached his father. His movement was tense, as if preparing for a difficult conversation. Emma stayed by the car, examining the unfamiliar environment with the distrust of a city child. James felt a familiar knot of anxiety form in his stomach. This visit wasn't an ordinary family gathering. Something had happened. Something important enough to force Michael to overcome distance and his own pride. In his son's eyes, he saw exhaustion and confusion, feelings that a doctor was used to hiding from patients, but couldn't hide from his own father. The old ranch held its breath, waiting for a conversation that could change everything. The silence stretched between father and son like a barbed wire fence. Michael stood 10 feet away from James, his hands clenched at his sides. The expensive suit looked out of place against the weathered barn and rolling Nebraska fields. Between them lay 2 years of unspoken accusations and a lifetime of misunderstandings. Emma remained by the car, her attention focused on her phone. She wore designer jeans and pristine sneakers that had never touched farm dirt. Her blonde hair fell like a curtain, hiding her face from the grandfather she barely knew. Every few seconds, she glanced nervously toward the empty barn, as if expecting horses to emerge from the shadows. James took the first step forward. His work boots crunched on the gravel driveway. Michael's jaw tightened, a gesture James remembered from the boy's childhood. It meant his son was preparing for battle. "You look tired," James said quietly. It was true. Dark circles shadowed Michael's eyes, and his usually perfect posture sagged with exhaustion. 3 weeks of sleepless nights will do that. Michael's voice carried the clipped tone he used with difficult patience. Emma has nightmares every night. She wakes up screaming about falling, about not being able to breathe. James felt the familiar ache in his chest. He remembered Michael having similar nightmares after his first serious fall. The boy had been 8, riding old Buttercup when a rattlesnake spooked the gentle mare. Michael had bounced right back then, eager to prove he wasn't afraid. But children were different now, more fragile somehow. How bad was the fall? James asked. Bad enough. Michael ran his hand through his graying hair. She was jumping. The horse refused at the last second. Emma went over his head, landed hard. Concussion, 3 broken ribs, bruised kidney. Could have been worse. A clinical description couldn't hide the father's terror. James heard it in the slight tremor of Michael's voice. His son had spent his career saving lives, but when it came to his own daughter, he felt helpless. Emma suddenly looked up from her phone. Her green eyes, Ellen's eyes, met James's for a brief moment before darting away. In that instant, he saw raw fear mixed with something else. Shame. The girl was ashamed of her terror, embarrassed by her inability to overcome it. "Hello, sweetheart," James called gently across the distance, but she managed a small wave. Her movement was careful, guarded, like someone expecting pain at any moment. Michael noticed the exchange and stepped closer to his father. His voice dropped to an urgent whisper. She used to be fearless, rode before she could properly walk. Jennifer started her on ponies when she was 3. Emma lived for riding lessons, horse camps, competitions. The past tense hung heavy between them. James understood that this wasn't just about a riding accident. The girl's whole world had collapsed. First her parents' marriage, then her confidence. The horse was simply the final blow. "Where's Jennifer now?" James asked. "Remarried, living in California with her new husband." Michael's tone turned bitter. "She thinks Emma needs to get over it and move on. Says keeping her away from horses is enabling her fears." James winced. He'd never particularly liked his daughter-in-law, but this level of callousness surprised even him. A child's trauma deserved patience, not dismissal. "That's why I brought her here," Michael continued. "You always said horses could teach people about trust, about overcoming fear. Maybe you can help her in ways I can't." The admission cost Michael something. James could see it in the rigid set of his shoulders, the way he avoided eye contact. His successful son was acknowledging failure, asking for help from the father he'd spent decades trying to escape. "Michael, I told you on the phone, there are no horses here anymore." James gestured toward the empty barn. "I gave away Thunder and Bell last spring. My arthritis got too bad to handle the daily care." "Then we'll find some elsewhere." Michael's voice took on the commanding tone he used in operating rooms. "The Harrisons still have horses, don't they? Or that therapeutic riding place outside Lincoln?" James shook his head slowly. "It's not that simple, son. You can't just throw a traumatized child back on any horse and expect magic to happen. It takes time, patience, the right animal. Most importantly, it takes trust." The word trust seemed to strike Michael like a physical blow. His face flushed, and years of suppressed anger suddenly bubbled to the surface. "Trust," he repeated, his voice rising. "Like the trust I had when you missed my high school graduation for your horse show? Or when you spent my college fund on that champion stallion that never won anything?" Emma looked up sharply from her phone. Her eyes widened as she witnessed her father's carefully controlled facade cracking. James felt the familiar guilt wash over him, the same guilt that had haunted him since Michael left for medical school. "I was building something," James said quietly. "The ranch, the breeding program. I thought it would be there for you, for your children. I thought you'd come back." "I did come back!" Michael's voice cracked with emotion. "Every summer, every holiday, hoping you'd finally have time for me instead of those damn horses. But there was always another training session, another competition, another excuse." The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a prairie fire. James wanted to defend himself, to explain that every hour spent with the horses was an hour spent building their future. But looking at his son's anguished face, he realized the explanation came 20 years too late. Emma suddenly spoke, for the first time since arriving. Her voice was small, barely audible over the Nebraska wind. "I don't want to see any horses." She clutched her phone like a lifeline. "I just want to go home." Both men turned toward her, their argument forgotten in the face of the girl's obvious distress. Her breathing had quickened, and her free hand pressed against her ribs where they'd been broken. The mere mention of horses had triggered her anxiety. Michael's anger deflated instantly. He moved toward his daughter, but she stepped back against the car. The rejection cut across his features like a blade. He was losing her too, just as he'd lost his relationship with his father. James watched the scene unfold with growing understanding. This wasn't just about Emma's fear of horses. This was about a family fractured by years of silence, misunderstanding, and missed opportunities. The girl's trauma had simply exposed the cracks that were already there. The wind picked up, rustling through the empty cornfields. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon, dark and threatening. James realized they were all running out of time. Emma to heal, Michael to reconnect with his daughter, and himself to make amends with his son. But standing in the shadow of his empty barn, with 3 generations of broken trust between them, James wondered if some wounds were simply too deep to heal. Even for someone who'd spent his life mending broken spirits, this felt like his greatest challenge yet. The storm James had seen building on the horizon arrived with prairie fury. Rain hammered against the farmhouse windows as the 3 generations huddled inside, trapped by weather and unspoken tensions. Emma sat curled in Ellen's old rocking chair, her phone clutched in white-knuckled hands. Michael paced by the window like a caged animal, checking his watch every few minutes. "The Harrisons said we could come by tomorrow morning," James said, setting down cups of coffee. "Tom thinks his mare Sunshine might be perfect for Emma. She's gentle, patient, been working with scared kids for years." Emma's head snapped up. "I said I don't want to see any horses." Her voice cracked on the last word. "Why won't anyone listen to me?" "Because running away won't make the fear disappear," Michael said, his doctor's authority creeping into his tone. "You have to face this, Emma. It's basic psychology." "Don't psychoanalyze me." Emma shot to her feet, the rocking chair swaying violently behind her. "You don't understand anything. You weren't there when I couldn't breathe, when I thought I was going to die." Her words hit the room like lightning. James saw something crumble in Michael's face, the careful control he'd maintained since arriving. His son had been treating Emma's trauma like a medical problem to be solved, not understanding the depth of her terror. "I understand more than you think," Michael said quietly. "I've seen trauma in my patients. I know how it affects the mind, the body." "Your patients?" Emma's laugh was bitter, too mature for her 15 years. I'm your daughter, not some case study. But you wouldn't know the difference, would you? You're never around long enough to learn. The accusation landed like a physical blow. Michael stepped back, his face pale. James recognized the look. It was the same expression his son had worn as a child when one of his horses had shied away from him. That's not fair, Michael whispered. Everything I do is for you and your future. Just like Grandpa did everything for you? Emma's green eyes blazed with hurt and anger. Mom told me about the horse shows he missed your school events for. About how you swore you'd never make me feel abandoned, like he made you feel. The silence that followed was deafening, except for the rain against the windows. 3 generations of pain laid bare in a teenager's desperate words. James felt the weight of every choice he'd made, every priority he'd placed above his son's need for attention. Michael sank into a chair, his head in his hands. I became everything I hated about my childhood, he said, his voice muffled. Working late, missing dinners, choosing surgery schedules over school plays. And now she's lost her mother to a new family, lost her confidence, and she's losing me too. Emma's anger dissolved into tears. She stood frozen in the middle of the room, as if afraid that moving would shatter what little control she had left. James watched his granddaughter struggle with emotions too big for her young heart to hold. Emma, James said gently, rising from his chair, do you know why your grandmother fell in love with this place? The girl wiped her nose with her sleeve, confused by the apparent change of subject. Because of the horses? Because of the silence, James said, moving toward the window. Outside, the storm was beginning to pass, leaving the world washed clean and glistening. She said cities were full of noise that drowned out the important things. Out here, you can hear what really matters. He turned back to face them both. Your father's right about one thing. You can't run from fear forever. But he's wrong about how to face it. You don't fight trauma with logic or force. You face it with patience, understanding, and the right kind of help. I don't want help, Emma said, but her voice lacked conviction. What if it wasn't about riding? James asked, his voice gentle, inviting Emma into a moment of reflection. What if it was just about remembering who you used to be before the fall? The girl who loved horses so much she dreamed about them every night. Emma's composure finally cracked. That girl was stupid, she sobbed. The floodgates of her grief opened. She trusted something that could have killed her. She thought she was invincible. And look what happened. James crossed the room and knelt beside his granddaughter's chair. Up close, he could see Ellen in her features, the stubborn chin, the expressive eyes, the way she held her shoulders when facing something difficult. Do you want to know a secret? He said quietly. Every horse person has been thrown. Every single one. I've been thrown more times than I can count. Your father was thrown dozens of times when he was learning. Dad rode horses? Emma looked at Michael with surprise. He was the best young rider I ever trained, James said, pride evident in his voice, despite their earlier argument. Fearless, natural, could communicate with horses like they shared a language. Just like you, according to your mother's letters. Michael looked up sharply. Mom wrote to you about Emma? James nodded. Every month until she got sick. Pictures, stories, videos of Emma riding. Your mother wanted me to know my granddaughter, even if..." He trailed off, not wanting to restart their argument. "Even if I was too stubborn to bring her to visit," Michael finished quietly. A new sound broke through their conversation. A desperate whinnying from outside carried on the storm-cleared air. It was followed by the sound of truck doors slamming and men shouting. Through the window, they could see headlights moving frantically across the Harrison property next door. James moved to the window and peered out. "Something's wrong at Tom's place." The whinnying came again, high and panicked. Emma was on her feet before she realized it, drawn by an instinct deeper than her conscious fear. "That horse is in trouble," she said, her trauma temporarily forgotten in the face of an animal's distress. "Stay inside," Michael said firmly, but Emma was already moving toward the door. "No," she said, her voice stronger than it had been all day. "If a horse is hurt, I have to help." She opened the door and stepped onto the porch. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with moisture and the scent of wet earth. Across the field, they could see Tom Harrison and his son Jake working frantically around their barn, flashlights cutting through the darkness. "Grandpa," Emma said, turning back to James with an expression he hadn't seen since she was small, "will you come with me?" It was the first time she'd called him Grandpa all day. The first time she'd asked for anything except to be left alone. James felt something shift in his chest, a familiar stirring he hadn't experienced since giving away his last horse. "Yes," he said simply. "We'll all go." As they walked across the muddy field together, 3 generations united by a horse's cry for help, James realized this was the moment Ellen had always believed would come. The moment when their shared love for horses would bridge the gaps that words couldn't cross. The moment when healing could finally begin. The scene that greeted them at the Harrison barn was organized chaos. Tom Harrison, a weathered man in his 70s, directed his son Jake with quiet urgency while their mare Sunshine lay on her side in the birthing stall. Her breathing was labored, and even in the dim light, they could see something was terribly wrong. "Foal's breached," Tom called out as he saw the Connors approaching. "Been trying to turn it for an hour, but she's weakening fast. Called the vet, but Doc Peterson's dealing with an emergency in Lincoln. Won't be here for another 2 hours." Emma stopped at the barn entrance, her newfound courage wavering. The mare's distressed breathing filled the space, and the metallic smell of blood made her stomach clench. Michael placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, ready to guide her away, but she shook her head. "I want to help," she said, though her voice trembled. James studied the situation with practiced eyes. He'd delivered dozens of foals over the years, dealt with complications that would have panicked younger horsemen. This was serious, but not hopeless. "Tom, you need smaller hands," James said, rolling up his sleeves. "Jake's too big, and your arthritis won't let you get the right angle." "What about the girl?" Tom asked, desperation evident in his voice. "Jennifer mentioned she had good instincts with horses." All eyes turned to Emma. She stood frozen between terror and instinct, her whole body trembling. The logical part of her mind screamed to run, to avoid any situation involving horses. But something deeper, older, pulled her forward. "I can't," she whispered. "What if I hurt them?" "What if you save them?" James asked quietly. "Emma, this mare is going to die without help. Her foal, too. Sometimes being afraid isn't a luxury we can afford." Michael stepped forward, his protective instincts flaring. "Dad, she's been through enough trauma. We can't ask her to—" "He's not asking," Emma interrupted, her voice gaining strength. "I'm choosing." She moved toward the stall with careful steps, each one a victory over her own fear. Sunshine lifted her head weakly, meeting Emma's eyes with a look that seemed to plead for understanding. The mare's dark eyes held no judgment, no expectation of perfection, only trust. "Tell me what to do," Emma said, kneeling beside the horse. For the next hour, 3 generations of Connors worked alongside the Harrisons in a symphony of quiet coordination. James guided Emma's hands, teaching her to feel for the foal's position. Michael, despite his lack of veterinary knowledge, proved invaluable in monitoring the mare's vital signs with clinical precision. His medical training translated surprisingly well to equine emergency care. "Easy, girl," Emma murmured to Sunshine, her fear gradually replaced by focus. "We're going to help your baby come safely." Her voice had taken on a quality James remembered from her childhood videos, a natural gentleness that horses instinctively trusted. As she worked, Emma's breathing synchronized with the mare's, creating a calm that seemed to ease Sunshine's distress. "There you gone," James said as Emma's careful maneuvering finally positioned the foal correctly. "Now we wait for the next contraction and help guide it out." When the foal finally emerged, a perfect filly with her mother's gentle eyes, tears streaming down her face. But these weren't tears of fear or trauma. They were tears of wonder, of connection reestablished, of a part of herself she'd thought was lost forever. Sunshine immediately began cleaning her newborn, soft nicking sounds filling the barn. The filly struggled to her feet on impossibly long legs, searching for her first meal. Life in its purest form, unburdened by fear or doubt. "You did that," Michael said softly, crouching beside his daughter. "You saved them both." Emma looked at her hands, still shaking but steady enough to have guided new life into the world. "I forgot," she said wonderingly. "For a whole hour, I forgot to be afraid." Tom Harrison clapped James on the back. "Like riding a bicycle," he said. "Your granddaughter's got the gift, just like you always did." As they walked back across the moonlit field, Emma found herself between her father and grandfather. The earlier storm had cleared the air, leaving behind the sweet scent of wet earth and growing things. The silence was comfortable now, filled with shared accomplishment rather than unspoken grievances. "Dad," Michael said suddenly, "I owe you an apology. All those times I accused you of caring more about horses than people, I never understood that you saw horses as a way to help people." James considered this for a long moment. "You weren't entirely wrong," he admitted. "I did get lost sometimes. Forgot the most important person in my life needed attention too. But horses taught me things I couldn't have learned any other way. Patience, empathy, how to read what someone needs without them saying it. Is that why Mom fell in love with you? Emma asked. Because you understood what she needed? Your grandmother saw through all my rough edges to something worth nurturing, James said. She believed I could be better than I was. Sometimes that's all people need. Someone who believes in their potential. They stopped at the porch, reluctant to break the spell of understanding that had settled over them. Emma looked back toward the Harrison barn, where warm light still glowed in the birthing stall. The foal, she said slowly. When she was born, she didn't know she was supposed to be afraid of falling. She just got up and tried again until she could stand. Horses live in the moment, James said. They don't carry yesterday's fears into today's possibilities. Maybe that's what I need to learn, Emma said. How to live like that again. Michael watched his daughter with new eyes, seeing not just her trauma, but her incredible resilience. She'd lost her confidence, but not her core strength. Tonight had shown him that healing wasn't about forgetting the fall. It was about remembering why she'd loved riding in the first place. Would you like to meet Sunshine properly tomorrow? James asked carefully. When she's had time to rest with her baby? Emma was quiet for so long that both men thought she might refuse. When she finally spoke, her voice was small but determined. Yes, she said. But I want to start slow. Maybe just grooming at first. No saddles, no riding. Just being with horses again. Whatever pace you need, James promised. Trust is built one small step at a time. As they prepared to go inside, Emma turned to her grandfather one more time. Thank you for not making me feel ashamed of being afraid. Courage isn't the absence of fear, James said, echoing words Ellen had once spoken to him. It's being afraid and helping anyway. Tonight, you showed more courage than most people find in a lifetime. Inside the farmhouse, the 3 generations settled into a peace they hadn't known in years. The storm had passed, both outside and within their family. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they were simply together. Grandfather, father, and daughter, united by an ancient bond between humans and horses. In her dreams that night, Emma didn't fall. Instead, she flew across endless fields on a horse made of starlight, fearless and free once more. Dawn came soft and golden across the Nebraska plains, painting the wet fields in shades of amber and rose. Emma woke before her phone alarm, something that hadn't happened since the accident. For the first time in weeks, she'd slept through the night without nightmares. The dream of flying on starlight lingered like a gentle blessing. From her bedroom window, she could see the Harrison barn where last night's miracle had unfolded. Smoke curled from their farmhouse chimney, and she imagined Tom and Jake checking on Sunshine and her new filly. The thought filled her with anticipation rather than dread, a feeling so foreign she almost didn't recognize it. Downstairs, she found her father and grandfather at the kitchen table, sharing coffee and what looked like their first comfortable conversation in years. Michael had traded his expensive suit for jeans and one of Grandpa's old flannel shirts. He looked younger somehow, less burdened by the weight of expectations he carried in his city life. "How's our new mother doing?" Emma asked, surprised by the eagerness in her own voice. "Tom called an hour ago," James said, smiling. "Sunshine's nursing well, and the filly's already trying to jump out of the stall. Sounds like she inherited her mother's spirit." "What about her name?" Emma asked. "Has anyone thought of what to call her?" James and Michael exchanged a meaningful look. "Actually," James said carefully, "Tom wondered if you'd like to name her, considering you helped bring her into the world." Emma felt a flutter of something between honor and nervousness. Naming a horse felt like claiming a connection she wasn't sure she was ready for. But looking at the two men who'd both shaped her understanding of courage, she realized this was part of healing too, allowing herself to care again. "Can I see her first?" she asked, "before I decide." 20 minutes later, the three Connors walked across the dewy field toward the Harrison barn. Emma's steps were steadier than yesterday, though her heart still raced with each step closer to the horses. The morning air carried the familiar sense of hay, leather, and horses, smells that had once meant safety and joy. Shining sunshine stood in the outdoor paddock, her newborn filly pressed close to her side. In daylight, both horses were even more beautiful than Emma remembered. The mare's coat gleamed like burnished copper, while her baby's was a softer shade, promising to darken as she grew. "They know you," Michael observed as both horses turned toward Emma with obvious recognition. "Look how Sunshine's watching you." It was true. The mare's dark eyes held a gentle wisdom, an acknowledgement of the trust they'd shared in her hour of need. The filly, bold with newborn curiosity, took a few tentative steps toward the fence where Emma stood. "She's not afraid," Emma whispered, watching the baby's confident movements. "Should she be?" James asked quietly. "She's never been hurt, never learned to doubt herself. To her, the world is full of possibilities." Emma understood the parallel he was drawing. The filly represented who Emma had been before the accident, fearless, trusting, eager to explore. The question was whether she could find her way back to that version of herself. "I want to go in with them," Emma said suddenly. Her father tensed beside her, but James nodded approval. "Go slow," he advised. "Let them come to you." Emma entered the paddock with careful, deliberate movements. Sunshine watched her approach with calm interest, while the filly hid behind her mother's protective bulk. Emma settled onto a hay bale in the corner, making herself small and non-threatening. "Ah, now you're remembering what actually matters," James finished softly. As the sun climbed higher, painting the barn in golden light, Emma made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. "Grandpa," she said, "would you teach me again? Not jumping or competing, just being with horses the way you and Dad used to be." James felt tears prick his eyes. "I'd be honored, sweetheart. We can start as slowly as you need." "What about school?" Michael asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "There are good schools here," Emma said, looking between her father and grandfather. "And I think I need to learn things they can't teach in Chicago, like how to trust again, how to live without fear." Michael was quiet for a long moment, processing his daughter was really asking. She wanted to stay, to rebuild herself in the place where horses and healing intersected. It would mean major changes for all of them. "I have vacation time saved up," he said finally. "Maybe I can stay for a few weeks, help you get settled, learn a few things myself." "About horses?" Emma asked. "About being a better father," Michael replied, meeting his own father's eyes across the paddock. "I think I have some catching up to do." James felt a lifetime of tension dissolve in that moment. His son wasn't just bringing Emma home. He was coming home himself, choosing connection over career, presence over prestige. "Your grandmother would be so proud," James said, his voice thick with emotion. "She always said this place was meant to heal broken things. Hearts, spirits, families." As they prepared to leave the paddock, Hope suddenly pranced up to Emma, full of youthful energy and joie de vivre. The filly's enthusiasm was infectious, and Emma found herself laughing, really laughing, for the first time since her accident. "See you tomorrow, little one," Emma promised, giving Hope one last gentle pat. "We're going to learn together, okay? How to be brave, how to trust, how to fly without falling." Walking back across the field, 3 generations moved together in comfortable rhythm. Behind them, Hope frolicked in the paddock while Sunshine grazed peacefully in the Nebraska sunshine. Ahead lay a future built on understanding, patience, and the ancient bond between humans and horses. Emma looked up at the endless prairie sky and felt something shift in her chest. Not the heavy weight of fear she'd carried for weeks, but something lighter. Something that felt remarkably like hope. "Grandpa," she said, slipping her hand into his weathered one, "tell me about the first horse you ever loved." As James began the story of a young boy and a stubborn pony named Patch, Emma realized she was ready to hear it all. The falls and the failures, the triumphs and trust rebuilt. She was ready to learn that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to love something so much that the fear became manageable. The bridge between generations was finally complete, built from shared stories, patient understanding, and the healing power of hope. And in a sun-drenched paddock in Nebraska, a filly named Hope took her first playful leap toward the sky, fearless in her joy and perfect in her trust. Some bridges, Emma thought as they walked toward home, were worth building no matter how long it took.